morning. I'm Ken Bibrai, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. In the news today, Russia is targeting Ukraine's power grid as part of a new strategy, and a swarm of coronavirus variants are expected to surge this winter. Today's topic is ensuring prosperity for all, and we are joined by Gary Cunningham, the CEO of Prosperity Now. Great to see you, sir.
It's good to see you, Ken. Thanks for having me today.
Well, look, I mean, I've been tracking the work you've been doing, and it was, great to get coffee in real life with you a few weeks ago, and excited to kind of hear what you guys are up to. But one of the things that I think is the best way to start this is you took on this role right in the fall of 2019 before a global pandemic. What have the last 3 years been like for you, the organization, and your team?
Well, Ken, it's been the best of times and the worst of times, as Charles Dickens would say. It's been the best of times because we've been able to laser focus on creating a world that works equally well for everyone. And we've been focused on how do we address these deep disparities on wealth that we have in America between people of color and indigenous people and whites, because I think the world we want to create is where everyone, and particularly our young people, have a path to economic prosperity. And over the last 20 years, economic mobility, meaning your ability to move from one class to another in America, has stagnated. In fact, you can be in Canada and have more economic mobility than we have in this country. And so one of the things, we have one of the greatest countries in the world. We have built one of the most highest productivity countries in the world. And we built a large middle class, which a lot of countries don't have. But not everybody was equally participating in that system of growing our middle class in America. And so we're trying to right the ship. Because I think most people believe if you work hard, you do the right thing, you should be able to prosper in America. And if there's barriers, we should remove those barriers so that everybody has an opportunity to grow and have wealth for them and their families and future generations. So that's what we're working on. It's been the worst of times. In part because of a lot of things that have went on over the last few years and continue. You mentioned a few right at the top of this podcast, which was, we're now in a significant war in Europe. We have inflation that has crept back after 30, 40 years of not even being much around. That is harming lower income people in this country significantly. But all of us pay a price when the economy isn't functioning well. And then we've had this virus, and you just mentioned that there are going to be all these variants coming out, this fall. And so the virus has created some separation, and so you look at your operations and what the fact that you're carrying real estate issues. You have the health of your employees that is so important, and the partners that you work with, and then you have uncertainty that gets created around that. I do want to say that our staff has been super productive, even in this situation, and in part because we have a purpose, and we have a joint shared mission, and that shared mission and purpose actually drives people to work harder. Because they're trying to accomplish something to change the society for the better. And so that's what's great about this country, is that people all over this country that I've been in native nations, in urban areas and rural areas of this country, everybody's actually trying to help each other do better. And so and that's what's happening with our staff at Prosperity Now. We have shifted our frames so that we center economic justice at the center of what we do.
That's great. And I think some of the focus has shifted a little over the last couple of years, if I'm mistaken, right? I think Prosperity Now really focused previously on mitigating some of the effects of this kind of broken system we have, and now more focused on transformation. Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you on a macro level kind of approach the challenges that you're trying to address?
Yeah, well, the issue is, what are the levers for change? If you talk about the wealth gap in America between people of color and whites, it's about a $7 trillion issue. Much of it is legacy, meaning, redlining. I just posted an article on the GI Bill that's pretty deep analysis of what happened when Black GIs got back. They weren't able to fully participate in the housing purchases through the federal home loan. They weren't able to participate in the GI Bill. And all of these things built the middle class in America. So when you get left out, even though you served your country, that's a sad testament to how race has played itself out. And the legacy of that is still with us today. So part of what we're attempting to do is trying to reframe the question, right? Because so many people see it as a zero sum. If people of color get something, then whites are going to get left out. There's all this talk about replacement and all of that. And what we believe at Prosperity Now is we all do better when we all do better. That if a community or a group of people is suffering because of the legacy of discriminatory acts, then we need to be able to figure out, how do we ensure that they can fully participate with everyone else. And so some of the things that we're working on is, we have a program that we're working all over the country on building high impact nonprofits of color. Meaning, if we're going to solve some of the issues that we have to build the infrastructure of these organizations so that they can actually take on the challenge. And what we find is many of them are robbing Peter to pay Paul, barely staying afloat, et cetera, when their mission is to help people move out of poverty. Another thing we're working on is we're just so grateful to some of the folks in the tech industry, particularly a company called Avanade, which is a partnership between Microsoft and Accenture, that has stepped forward and is really working with us on how would we help 1 million entrepreneurs of color succeed in America, and how would we use technology, algorithms, how would we use machine learning to actually buttress some of the minority business support organizations and community development financial institutions, so that resources can actually get to these entrepreneurs that are the backbone of creating jobs and economic stability in communities of color. So we're working with them on that. And then you might know, we just launched with Bloomberg Philanthropies and the Greenwood Initiative. We've launched the Black Wealth Data Center, because we believe that data and information leads to new solutions, and that there's no one place that you can go and really learn and understand from a nonpartisan way, and deep research on what's going on with the wealth gap in your community. So if you're a community activist, if you're a citizen, if you're an academic, et cetera, you can actually go to one place and get all of the data on what's going on with African Americans, but it also contains data on all racial groups within the Black Wealth Data Center. So those are a few things. I can mention that we're starting to work on the climate economy and entrepreneurship within that. That's related to the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the other work going on around climate change. And then, we have on our website the Prosperity Scorecard, which is another data source for communities to say, what policies should we implement that's really going to create economic mobility in our community? And not economic mobility just for people of color, economic mobility for everyone, because in part, not everybody's situated to opportunity in the same way, Ken. And so you need strategies that actually address that. And those strategies actually could work for somebody in Appalachia as well as somebody in Detroit. So, that's what we say. We want financial systems and structures that work well for everyone.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned a lot there, right? And I think one of the key things is your focus on data and metrics. So how exactly are you looking to kind of test, invest, and scale solutions? Like, how are you kind of framing this argument to go to policymakers, private sector partners, other nonprofits? I mean, how important is the data and the tracking that you're doing to making that narrative?
Well, we all use data.
Yeah.
In our everyday lives. You're using
especially Mike Bloomberg, right?
right. But the reality of it is what gets measured changes.
Mm-hmm.
What gets observed changes. This is just a fact. And if you don't measure it, or you have no way to determine where you're at or where you're going, you won't be able to solve these issues. Now, I call these issues they're wicked issues, because there have been a lot of people that have put a lot of energy over many years to try to solve these issues, but they're not exactly a math formula. 1 + 4 = 5. It's more complex because you're dealing in complex systems. So the data, digging underneath the data and looking at what works, right? So it's not just about getting a bunch of statistics together and throwing them on the table. Across the country, there are communities that are actually solving some of these issues that people don't really know about. So having that highlighted for communities so they can actually say, oh, that, building entrepreneurial ecosystem actually worked. And I just got back from Tulsa where they're building that, or it worked in New York or wherever. Then you don't have to recreate the wheel. You actually can go to a place that has been verified about what works. So it's not just about throwing out data, which is it's important to have clear, accurate, and concise data. It's also about the narratives, the stories we tell, about what the issues are. For example, so often you hear negative stories about African Americans not doing well on this or not doing well on that. And it's true, meaning there are some gaps in health and housing, education, but there's also strengths in the African American community that don't get talked about. And I'll give you an example. 1960, African Americans had the highest marriage rate in the country for married people. Yeah, it was somewhere around 70%, right? And they actually were doing, they weren't doing great because all these Jim Crow and other things that were going on, but they had intact families. Public policy was developed to try to help the situation that exacerbated part of the problem. So, part of a good thing, which is providing a safety net, but part of the negotiations around that created a rule that if you were receiving TANF benefits or aids to dependent families, you couldn't have a man living in the house. Well, that creates some dynamics, particularly at a time when most of the industrial jobs were drying up for Black men that had moved to the North. So you had a situation where women had to put their men out of the house or whatever that relationship were in order to get money to take care of their families. And it created a dynamic today. Black women are the least likely to be married in our society and are raising most of Black children. And so, and then we had the war on drugs, the war on crime, unequal distribution of justice that led to a mass incarceration of Black men. So, all of these things compound to create the conditions that we have. And then people look, and say, oh, well, there's something wrong with those, et cetera. Well, when you have these kind of structural issues happening, it creates the dynamic within, the structure of the policies create the conditions that we live. The tax system is another system that actually rewards people that have money and punishes the people that don't. I mean, that's our tax structure right now. Warren Buffett said it pretty clearly. I pay less taxes than my secretary. And that's true on many different levels. And so, the question becomes, how do we create a society that's fair? We recently had a child care tax credit. And that tax credit proved without a shadow of a doubt the hit rate rose more children of color out of poverty than anything except for the earned income tax credit. And so this dynamic, and then it's not in, it got taken out of the legislation, et cetera. Now we're spending billions of dollars on war and other things, but we can't spend a few $billion on our kids to keep them out of poverty so that they can live well and be productive citizens. These are the choices we're making. And I haven't met a mother or father, I don't care where they came from, that doesn't want their kids to do well.
So how important is it to talk about criminal justice reform when you're thinking about economic mobility? I mean, how important is it to have that narrative weaved into our justice system? And
well, I think all of these things are interconnected.
Yeah.
Meaning these systems are interconnected. So if people don't have productive work that actually pays well and good jobs, then they do other things as a part of that. And so the antecedents, meaning the beginning of this, is that you give everyone hope that they can actually fully participate. And then you'd see some of these crime and other things go down because there's, I'll give you an example. Prosperity Now has the largest network of children's that have savings accounts in the country, about a little over 1 million kids. And what we found through research is that any child that has a savings account has a 4 times greater chance of matriculating through college. Well, why is that? Right? 4 times greater chance of getting through college. The reason for that is that savings account, little $7,500, creates the hope and the anticipation and the expectation that that child's going to go on to college. And you know what? That hope creates the opportunity for them to do that. Say we had every kid in America that had what we call a baby bond, right? Meaning an investment that when they turned 18, they could invest in themselves. They could invest in college. They can invest in a home ownership. They can invest in a business. And that would level, that would, over a generation, that would completely level the racial wealth divide in America. America actually doesn't actually put enough into its safety net to actually move people out of poverty. So what we're talking about is investments. Usually when they talk about people of color and invest, they talk about them as subsidies, right? And then when they invest in, upper middle class communities, they call them investments, right? I mean, seriously, right? And so we need to make investments, particularly in our young people, but in all of these structures that COVID has laid bare, these stark disparities, both in healthcare and housing and, et cetera. So I'll stop there and let you ask.
Well, we hosted a talk a couple of weeks ago with Pete Stavros, who is the head of private equity at KKR, and he's created a nonprofit called Ownership Works. And he pointed to one of the challenges being the lack of equity ownership on the part of minority communities to participate in owning stock and upside as markets grow. And the data was shocking to me in terms of the number of white families that have participation in the stock market and have seen kind of stocks grow, and his nonprofit looking to advise companies on how to give ownership and equity in companies to the workers, and the impact that has on culture and community and productivity and so on. It seemed to echo a lot of what you're saying. So
yeah, he's right on, actually. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of these things where it's, as you're talking, it kind of connects a lot to it. But as you think about where we are right now, you've just been appointed by the Treasury Department on a really exciting equity advisory task force. You've made some comments about Inflation Reduction Act. What could and should the federal government be doing? What do you hope to tell Treasury Department? What did you like about inflation reduction? What priorities are in the pipeline in Congress right now that you think need more attention or need to get passed? What is your kind of federal focus at the moment?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of good stuff in the Inflation Reduction Act, one of which, we work at Prosperity Now with a large network of tax preparers that provide free tax preparation all over the country. And we have a network that actually is the Taxpayer Opportunity Network that focuses on that. So the investment in the IRS really is an important investment because it actually is going to make it a lot easier, a lot more friendly, a lot more ability for people to actually file for their earned income tax credit, helping people do that. And, I've been all over this country, Ken, and I've seen folks give up their time, their energy to help others so that they can move out of poverty through tax preparation. So that investment was huge. And and so I don't think it'll be like 90,000 folks going out to audit everybody. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about making our system work. The energy efficiency investment also can help business and employees of color because they, if you look at businesses of color, most of them are below $1 million in revenue. Most of them are very small, and most of them are in storefront businesses. So if you can think about moving some of those businesses and those business owners to actually the green climate economy, I think it will actually has a transformating effect. And there's a lot of incentives to do that within the Inflation Reduction Act. So I think these are great opportunities. And who can actually argue with the fact that we need to change our situation with our climate? We're just, we're destroying the planet and we're in denial or something. But this investment, large investment in green economy is so critical for not only us, but our world, our planet. And so making sure that people of color and indigenous people can participate in these investments, I think is critical to change America.
Yeah. So we have those positive trends and that type of investment from the federal government. But right now, you've mentioned on the cusp of a potential recession, inflation creeping up. What are your kind of thoughts and concerns about the next 2 years ahead of us? And, just coming out of the pandemic, it wasn't an equitable recovery for everybody. It was a very disproportionate recovery, if that's what we want to call it. And now hitting some real kind of tailwinds on the economy. How concerned are you about progress that's been made and kind of a backslide?
Well, I think everybody should be concerned. There's a worldwide shift that's going on. Our stock market is showing that pretty clearly about where we're headed. And unless we ensure that our policies, even during these times of recession, are even-handed and don't have a deleterious effect on low-income people and middle-income people in this country, I think that's where my attention is on, and that's where Prosperity Now's attention on is how do we address some of these underlying systemic issues that continue to exacerbate the wealth divide in America, where everybody can't participate. So there's a number of ways. I mentioned some of them already. We are organizing. We have like the affordable housing network that we have created, really focused on how do we address the issue of safe, decent, affordable housing, particularly as some of the underwriting for some of the rent subsidies that were in place, et cetera, are now going away. So we're facing a crisis that is going to be pretty sizable. But I say all that, I actually have faith in this country. I have faith in that we can turn these things around, that we have taken on in this country together. We've done some powerful things. And I think it is these inflection points when things are tough or there are things that we know we have to significantly change, that this country has risen to the occasion time and time again. And we can do it now.
That's amazing. So look, to close it out, you're based in DC, but you're national. You're finding best practices in communities, you're sharing, you're amplifying, you're connecting. What can people listening do to be helpful? I mean, what support do you need from the private sector, other nonprofits, and elected officials, maybe? Real quick.
Well, number one, we need all your money.
You need all
I say that a little facetiously, but we actually are a nonprofit operating in a lot of different places. And so we're actually need to raise money as part of what we do. No money, no mission. So that's important to us. And so people can go to our website, prosperitynow.org, and donate. That's one thing you can do. I think the other thing is you can go to our website and sign up for our mailing list and be in some of our networks. If you really want to make a difference, you can step up to the plate. This is not like a solo sport that we're in. This is actually a team sport, and it takes all of us. And so learning and understanding what we're doing, we're really reframing the picture because we think everybody should do well, right? We don't think that just people of color should do well. We think everybody should do well. And in order to do that, you need to develop different strategies for different groups. So I'll give you an example. If you and I were in a shopping mall together, and opportunity was on the third floor, we'd need different conveyances to get to the third floor. So some of us can go walk up the stairs to the third floor. Some of us take the escalator. Then some of us run up the down escalator, and then the people look at you when you get up there and say, well, why don't all your people do that, right? You're exhausted, tired because you run up and down the escalator. But if you're in a wheelchair, we build elevators, right? They're just differently situated. Nobody argues about people, even though elevators are much more expensive, nobody argues about that because we all take advantage of it. So this idea of creating structures that actually are set up for how people are situated, not only would help people of color, but it helped that child in Appalachia. It helped that child in New York, no matter what their race. And so that's where we need to get it right, is that this is just not a zero-sum dynamic that we're just going to help people of color because they've been suffered so much. It is so important that we have structures of opportunity for everyone in this country, and we can do it. We've done it. And so now's the time for us, these big challenges take big investments, and that's what we need to do. We need to invest in our people.
It's amazing. Well, now everyone listening knows why I like to hang out with you, Gary. It's always uplifting, fire, motivating. Gary Cunningham, Prosperity Now, prosperitynow.org. And I just love the narrative. It's a rising tide, making these investments help everyone in this country. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being on today. Everyone tuning in, we're going to be taking a couple-week break. We're expecting baby Bibberai number 3. So we're going to take a little break. Coffee will definitely still be pouring in our household. In the meantime, visit coffeewithken.com. You can check out past sessions, and you can also listen on Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Gary, great seeing you, sir.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the opportunity to talk. Take care now.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.